Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk with Dr. O, just keeping it real, speaking the truth, real and raw. I want to welcome you this evening. I'm your personal relationship enhancement advisor. I deal with real issues that require real conversations, helping both the married and dating couples, individuals, and those who've gone through the pain of a divorce, identify how conflict between their childhood three T's, tradition, training, and trauma contributes to often relationship breakups and marriages ending in divorce. One of the things tonight, our topic tonight is overcoming the sting of infidelity. Um, Stop what you're doing right now and call that male or that female that you know may benefit from this topic on tonight. When you overcome something, it means that you succeed in dealing with a problem or a difficulty. You learn some ways to cope with it, and that's what it means to overcome the sting. When I think of a sting, it's the act of infidelity is inflicting pain upon someone. That wound become infectious, and it becomes poison, and oftentimes it hurt to the very core. And infidelity, as we know, is the active state of being unfaithful to a spouse or your other sexual partner. Infidelity, cheating, whatever way they want to refer to it is, it's an act of being unfaithful. It typically means that you're engaging in sexual or romantic relations with someone other than that one significant person in your life. It involves breaking a commitment or promise in the act. I was looking at some statistics, and it says that it is estimated that 30 to 60% of all married people in the United States cheat on their spouse. And this number is even higher among those who are dating. This means that if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, statistically, they're saying that you're more likely to cheat on them than just remain faithful. It's amazing when we did this on Clubhouse that there were males and females in the audience, and we had females and males both come in and acknowledge being unfaithful in a relationship or a marriage and the results of it. And what I want to do tonight is just point out the fact that, listen, it's not always the male that go outside of the relationship or marriage. Females do go outside. Typically, that's the way we think. But I was glad to know that those that did and had, they came boldly and they begin to share their testimonies. And so when I began to look at some of the research, it said approximately 13% of married women reported cheating on their spouses. And these were the women that were ranging in the age of 18 to 29 years of age. And they were more likely to go outside of the marriage. And married women, it was higher. So I just want to say that, it's a powerful thing, and it's very painful. One of the things I talk about when we're in the Real Talk, just keeping a real conversation, real issues book. This is something that I talk about in truth and honesty. Everybody ought to have this conversation somewhere down the line. I talk about in that fellowship stage when you meet someone for that first time. You may or may not decide you want to get to know each other better. And when you get to that point, you're saying that the two come into a power of agreement that, okay, I want to get to know you better. Listen, you entered into a relationship. That relationship, to me, it means you're learning to relate to one another. So I often talk about during this stage, I talk about being honest and truthfulness. It is critical that during this time you begin to discuss things that you want to know. I often get this question: when do I ask the question? And it's simple to me. When do you want to know the answer? What I find, though, is oftentimes because of the fear of feeling that person may walk away and not come back. Oftentimes people will not be honest and ask questions. But what I know is that you need to be honest with yourself when it comes down to things that you want to know. We can't assume that everybody knows what we're thinking. We can't assume that everybody's operating, that we come in contact with honesty and truthfulness. Some individuals, you got to understand their definition of telling the truth. They may tell you part of something and not the total story. So therefore, I told you the truth. But if there's any withholding of any portion of that question, guess what? You have not been totally honest or truthful in that situation. So trustworthiness, you have to be able to have the ability to rely on that person as being open and honest with you. And one thing about open and honesty, it gives each individual an opportunity to make a decision. What do I mean by that? If you ask that person a question and that question is answered contrary to what you want or you believe, listen, it's time for you to do self-examination. Okay, if they were honest about that and you're saying, okay, well, I think I can't. No, be honest with yourself. Because trusting an individual in a relationship, it is so important. You need to know, will they be reliable? Will they be a person of integrity? Not only being honest, but having moral principles. I talk about in the book Inquisition. That's when you begin to ask those questions about anything you want to have an answer to. I talk about observation. Observation is monitoring those behaviors. Being honest with yourself. Is what you're seeing different from what was stated to you? And then I talk about going in and investigating. That's looking deeper into conversations that you shared and things you've done. One of the things I'm talking about again, overcoming the sting of infidelity. And we're going to get onto that tonight. And that's being able, when you talk about overcoming again, finding the ability to deal with a problem or a difficulty. And what I find oftentimes, I've talked to males and I've talked to females, and both have said how painful it is. And when it's painful, oftentimes they're left baffled. They don't even know what to do with it. Where would I go with it from this point? So what I talk about in the relationship stage, it is so important, again, that you begin to ask some questions. Simple. How do you feel about infidelity? And see what that person say. Because sometimes people who are not ready for commitment to a one-on-one, people who come in with the mindset, okay, it's not about a commitment. I'm just here for the booty call, whatever you want to refer to it as. Let's just keep it real. You need to ask these questions. How do you feel about infidelity? Do you have a problem with being faithful in a relationship? Some people may answer that question, yes. And if they say, I have a problem, and look, it's time to take inventory. It's time to stop at that moment and decide, can I really, really live with someone who's being unfaithful? Oftentimes, because male and females, because they have been hurt, oftentimes from their childhood, they've gone through rejection and abandonment issues. And so then, therefore, when they come into contact with somebody and they're unfaithful, oftentimes they're hanging there. And you cannot hang in there with the illusion that, you know what, perhaps it's going to get better. It's not going to get any better unless that person truly has a change of heart. So you have to ask these type questions. Have you been unfaithful in a relationship? And I often tell people, if they have tell you, yeah, then you need to dig a little bit further. It's up to that individual whether they want to answer your questions or not. And then I ask them some things. I tell them, have you been married before? Why did you get a divorce? Was infidelity one of the reasons or part of the reason you got a divorce? How serious are you when you say you want to commit to one person? What does that mean to you? Because oftentimes, again, people will not ask these questions for fear that this person may walk away, they won't come back. Listen, you rather than walk away now than allow yourself to continue not only be emotionally involved with them and turn around and get involved with them have a sexual soul tie, and then you're stuck in this situation. Be point blank. If they have been married before, have you committed adultery or did you commit adultery? How long did that affair last? Because I'm going to talk about, some affairs, infidelities are what they call opportunists. This occurs when a person is in love and they're attached to their partner, but succumb to some type of sexual desire for someone else. It was just an opportunist time. It was nothing that was planned. It's just something that presented itself and it happened. So again, why did you get a divorce? Was infidelity a part of that? And then while in that committed relationship, this is one, they're not married, but in that committed relationship, did you have sex with someone other than your partner? If so, how many times did you go out? This is so important, because if you don't ask this information and you have a desire to, and this person comes out and start doing something like this, then who are you going to be at fault with? You can't blame that individual. But if you had asked those questions, then you would know. And I began to ask those type questions and let people know how you feel, because in order for you to overcome this thing, it is painful. What I found in dealing with males and both females, oftentimes in the childhood, talking about the 3 T's: tradition, training, and trauma. Traditionally, how you were raised, who raised you, the influence they had on you concerning relationships. I've dealt with men who have seen their mothers. I've dealt with men who've seen their aunts and people who are unfaithful in relationships. And so they grew up with this suspicion that what? All women are cheaters. Vice versa. I've talked with women who grew up in homes and families where there were men, their fathers or uncles or someone was unfaithful, and it appeared to be acceptable, because guess what? They stayed in those relationships that even though the other spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend knew unfaithfulness was going on, they stood in there. So how does that affect in the 3 T's? When that happens, then they say, oh, okay, it's already ingrained in them that when it happens, it may hurt, but we're going to work through this. We're going to stay in there. Oftentimes people stay in relationships, in marriages, even when infidelity has taken place, because it may be an economic thing. They're staying in there because they feel if I move out or I move on financially, I won't be able to make it on my own. Sometimes they stay in it for the reason of the children. We got children. You're going to raise the children together. So people stay in these relationships for various reasons. There's something called obligatory infidelity. This type of infidelity is based on the fear now, that resisting someone's sexual advances will result in rejection. Let me tell you something. Oftentimes, although males are involved in infidelity, oftentimes female feels that they're obligated to submit to these sexual advances to avoid being rejected. Listen, some people cheat not because they want to cheat, just because they need that approval that comes along with having the attention of some others. So it is important that we understand that infidelity is wrong, it's hurtful, and it's painful. It is a sting that comes over. But what do you do about it? And I'm gonna get to that in a minute, because I have known of marriages, I've known a relationship where either the male or female is well aware that their spouse or their mate is being unfaithful, and they hang in there, they stay in there, and they come up with reasons why they need to stay. But I say this often, I truly believe in the relationship stage, when you're learning to relate to that individual, anytime you want to know something, you need to ask it. It is so important. And oftentimes we talk about romantic infidelity, and this is sometimes, but not always now, it's a deficit in the existing relationship that leads people to have extraordinary affairs. Now, this doesn't justify, it doesn't make any excuses. But again, we talked about not too long ago, not tonight, my back hurt, my head hurt. Listen, we must be real and understand that, especially in marriages, there are sexual needs that need to be met. And we can't always come up with reasons why. And I do understand sometimes looking a little deeper behind that, stop, no, not tonight. There may be something lurking from the childhood that people may not even recognize or realize as existing. Let me give this as an example. I know of situations where, let's say the wife passed by and the husband pats her on the hiney. And it's like, stop, don't do that. Okay, stop, don't do that. And so until the husband brought it to their attention and began to say, do you realize you always say that? Okay, guess what? Wasn't even aware of it, but let me tell you where that comes from. And digging deeper, what happened as a young girl growing up, there was a gentleman that used to visit their home. And what would do, he would always find the parents in a position wherein they were either outside doing something because they were always entertaining, and he would find an opportunity to have to go to the restroom. And so what he would do is he would always find an opportunity to try to touch this young lady inappropriately. So it was always a fight, stop, and get out of the way. He would always come in. Children remained in the house, the adults outside. So this is one of the things that I talk about and dig in a little bit deeper. Sometimes there could be some childhood trauma there that people may not even realize or recall. I talk often about sensory memory. I talk about how our eyes, our ears, our taste, our touch, our sight, all of these things, gateways is what I refer to them. Oftentimes, they respond to things that we may not even have a picture in our minds to recall what happened or why we were responding the way we were responding. So I just wanted to bring that out. Sometimes there are different things that happen and transpire that we don't even realize this existing. Okay, and when we talk about romantic infidelity, this type of infidelity, it occurs when the person who's going outside of the marriage or outside of that relationship, they have now developed an emotional attachment to that other person. And listen, that emotional attachment may have started out just through conversationing, and then they begin to talk more and more. And then from talking to one another, then it moved into something, into a sexual relation. And this is why we must understand that when you say you committed in your marriage and you're going to make it work, this is for the person who may be experiencing this now. I often say to people, if you make the decision to stay in a marriage and infidelities go on, listen, number one, if you made that decision, you got to, first of all, I'm going to encourage you to seek the Lord. You need to seek the Lord for guidance and direction. And I'm not telling you to run out and get a divorce, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm encouraging you to do, if you make that decision to remain, then you have to come to a place of peace within yourself. Because you can't rely on anyone else to bring you peace. You can't rely on anyone else to allow joy to come within you. You have to make up in your mind. If you're going to stay, I tell people, don't keep regurgitating. Don't keep throwing it up. Because what is that going to do? You made the decision to stay. I'm not minimizing your hurt or the sting of infidelity. I'm just saying, if you make the decision to stay, then you have to come to a place of peace within yourself. And then what are you going to require? See, what I tell people oftentimes when infidelity happened, the person the spouse or the mate went out on, they begin to examine themselves. Was I not good enough? Did I not please them? Listen, you can't go through those mind games. You got to cut that out now. If you know you have been faithful in this marriage, you have submitted your body as to perform the role as a husband or a wife, and that person step outside. Don't start looking at yourself as a failure. Let me tell you what, you have to go back and examine that again. Where is this coming from? You know, and oftentimes, again, people will remain because, number one, they may feel like I can't do any better. Number two, it might be financial reasons. Number three, sometimes children are involved. But whatever the reason is that you choose to stay, come to a place of peace with it. And I know some of you out there saying I disagree, but I guarantee you some of you out here who are listening to this broadcast right now, who may have experienced a spouse or mate going outside of you, and you decided to stay, guess what? You can't keep rehashing it. You need to come to a place of peace within yourself. I tell people, start focusing on you. What can you do to improve you? Not that there's anything wrong with you, but what I'm saying is focus on you. How do I grasp this? And if I'm going to stay and find the power to move forward, you can't keep throwing it up, throwing it up. Because guess what? You made the decision to say. Only you can make that decision that I'm not going to stay or I'm going to go. And if you make it again, don't rehearse it. Don't keep regurgitating it. You need to go and begin to focus on self. I tell people sometimes, there may be something you wanted to do. You might have wanted to go back to school. You might have wanted to learn a particular trade. Start focusing on you. Take your eyes off that individual because listen, you made the decision that you wanted to stay. So, it's important that the other type of infidelity is called conflicted romantic infidelity. This type of infidelity is when people experience genuine love and sexual desire for more than one person at a time. But I'm gonna get a little bit deeper on this tonight. Oftentimes I talk about soul ties and how you get when you have that, the word talk about the two shall become one. Anytime you're sexually intimate with someone, you are physically becoming one and spiritually you become one. And oftentimes people will move on, but they're still connected. I call it a spiritual marriage. You could call it whatever you want, but I call it a spiritual marriage. They are still spiritually married to that individual. So oftentimes there's another spirit. And I say this, I think about the history of people of color. Here the gentleman was bought into slavery. He was supposed to go to this hut, have sex, have a child, move on. Not supposed to have connection. Go to the next hut, have sex, have a child, move on. Go to the next hut, have a sex, have a child, move on. That spirit of infidelity enters in. And sometimes, let me tell you something, sometimes we may be dealing with something, a spirit from the generational lines. This spirit has been transferred through the generational line. You can find that in David, in the scriptures with David and his sons and the raping of his daughter. These things, some of these things may have deeper roots to them and just on the surface infidelity. I encourage you, if it's going on in you, pray that God begin to enlighten your darkness. Pray that God will give you wisdom on how to pray. Pray that God will begin to sever those soul ties and of outside influences and all of these things. Again, this if you decide to stay, because infidelity, yes, it does have a sting. It has a sting, and it can become poisonous. Oftentimes, people can lose themselves, their self-worth when these type things go on. And I'm gonna talk about the fifth one right quick. It's called commemorative infidelity. This type of infidelity occurs when a person is in a committed relationship but has no feeling for their partner. It's just about the sex. No feelings, just about the sex. And listen, let me point this out again. It's not always males. It's sometimes female. So one thing you need to do is be honest with yourself again about what you're willing to settle for. Are you going to remain in this relationship? Are you going to remain in this marriage? If you are, don't keep regurgitating. Begin to focus on yourself. Pray for the healing. And listen, you got to forgive. You must forgive. Because if you don't forgive, let me tell you what, this will begin to eat at you. And before you know it, you become emotionally depleted. You become drained. A whole lot of things will begin to do it. You got to work through your feelings often of anger toward that person. Don't let that anger turn into a root of bitterness. That's why I say at some point in time, you have to truly ask God to give you the will and the power to forgive. The will and the power to forgive. Now, if it continues on, again, that's your choice if you stay. Oftentimes, after infidelity, it's not uncommon for someone to start criticizing themselves, analyzing, Why did they do this? What went wrong? Was I at fault? Listen, you don't necessarily have to be fault. Sometimes you're battling with some things. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, rulers of darkness, spiritual wickedness in the high place. Sometimes there are other forces that we're dealing with, and we may not even recognize it. Another thing is, if you decide to stay, I often say love covers a multitude of faults. Do you? Is your love that great that you're willing to let it cover what's going on? And another thing I tell people, don't make idle threats. If it happens again, I'm going to walk away. Okay? Now, if it happens again and you don't walk away, you just allow that spirit to come in and take full control. Do not make idle threats. If you come to that conclusion that if it happens again, I'm walking away, you need to walk. Now, am I saying you stay away? No, that's a decision you have to make. But what I am saying is this may be a great opportunity that person may desire, may not desire to seek counsel or get them in counsel. And if they don't, listen, you go get counsel. Find out how you can deal with it. Find out how you can walk away and not go back. You may want to stay after you walk away, but please don't make idle steps. Make the decision to let go. Express your pain, the responsibility. Stop being the victim and blaming others. I need you to focus on the present. Find joy. Forgive them. Forgive yourself. Move on. Why did I say forgive yourself? Because oftentimes when infidelity comes in, again, people start looking at themselves, finding fault, self-criticism. And then you got to decide. Do you want to break up with your partner or do you want to work on your relationship? And then this is when I ask people that you go out and you begin to seek counsel. It's often good to find counsel from someone and seek where, people to come inside. What I find oftentimes is sometimes the male don't want to get counsel. They don't feel they need any help. But guess what? That does not stop you from getting the help that you would desire to do. So my time is up tonight. I want to thank you all for joining me. Again, I want to encourage everyone, if you are enjoying the Real Talk with Dr. O, I want you to please start sending topics that you would like to hear us speak on. I will be bringing in other guest speakers from time to time. We're getting ready to do a conference coming up next month called Sex is Key in Marriage. And I'm dealing with this because that keeps coming up. People, we need to understand the realness of the power of sex, and God created it to be good within the confinements of a marriage. It is for enjoyment. It is for pleasure. So we're going to talk about that. I have some awesome speakers that are going to be coming forth with us. It will be a virtual conference through Zoom. I will be posting it real soon. So look for it. You will have to register for it. So I just want to say that tonight. And also I want to remind everyone that, you can find my book. It's called Real Talk with Dr. O, Just Keeping It Real. You can find it on Amazon.com. A lot of things that I talk about on Real Talk with Dr. O, Just Keeping It Real. You will find it in the book, Real Talk, Just Keeping It Real, Real Issues, Real Conversation. It can be found again on Amazon.com. So I just want to say that tonight. So again, this is Real Talk with Dr. O, Just Keeping It Real. You can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. And also for those of you who have Clubhouse, I'm on Clubhouse. I want to thank you all tonight for joining me. If you have any questions, anything, please feel free to send it to my email, drorulak@gmail.com. I want to say thank you again for joining me. Shalom. Good night.